Should I
Welcome
introduce
back.
us? Or
Welcome back. Hello, Sonia and Mao. Again, we are in the session Physics and Metaphysics of Social Powers. So, thank you both for joining and take it away.
Thank you so much for having us. I was just asking if we should introduce ourselves, which we will. So I will introduce myself, and then Mao can introduce herself, so that I don't make any mistakes, because my brain is on hyper abstractions at the moment. Anyway, I am Sonia. I'm a PhD student based in Rotterdam at the Erasmus School of Philosophy, and we've been working on this paper with Mao recently. And Mao, please.
Yes, so I'm a PhD candidate at the Université du Québec à Montréal in cognitive computing, and I'm also a director of research strategy at Versus.
Thank you. So yeah, as Daniel said, we're going to be talking about the spectrum, the big spectrum of between the physics and the metaphysics of social powers. Very inspired by the work of Ramsted here, Hesp, Heinz, and by Mao's work on power recently with Sarah Grace Mansky. And then we're trying to combine that with some work that I'm doing with two other colleagues, Wilkins and Clavel Vasquez, on the concept of active ignorance, which we will be continuing to work on in the coming time. So yeah, and then generally inspired by ideas of semantic attraction from Hinton, and by major names in philosophy and sociology who have been treating these concepts through different avenues, less kind of formal avenues, but still relevant nonetheless, now that we're actually capable of joining the physical with the metaphysical. That's what we're gonna try here with this presentation. So the concept of power, we argue, can be explored at several scales, from physical action and process effectuation all the way to complex social dynamics. So this kind of spectrum-wide analysis of power requires attention to the fundamental principles that constrain these processes. And in the social realm, the acquisition and maintenance of power is intertwined with both social interactions and cognitive processing capacities. So socially facilitated empowerment grants empowered agents more information processing capacities and opportunities, either because they're relying on others to bring about desired policies, and or because they're able to enjoy more information processing possibilities as a result of relying on others for the reproduction of material tasks. Material is in brackets because these tasks need not be material. So the effects of social empowerment imply an increased ability to compute information, thereby augmenting the evolution of a specific state space. Specific is a keyword here, really commenting back on what Mao just mentioned at the end of the previous talk. So empowered individuals attract the attention of others. Attention is one of the central focus of our paper. So they attract the attention of others who contribute to increasing the scale of their access to various policies effectuating these state spaces that we mentioned. So the presented argument posits that social power in the context of active inference is a function of several variables, among them an individual's or group's ability to attract the attention of others with access to or the ability to facilitate desired policies, and an individual's or group's capacity to effectively process information. As a result of its power amplifying effects, this extended computational ability also buffers against potential loss or possible vulnerabilities. Semantic social artifacts, so narratives, ideologies, histories, representation at large, are attentional scripts which ensure the coordination of social patterns. So you can think of anything from psychological schemata, habits, groupthink, insulation, policies, etc. And these are the structures under and by which agents mediate and leverage power. And they're, because of that, the main focus of attention here. So thinking about this, the linking between the physical and the metaphysical concepts and the world, gravitational metaphors abound in language. This is like really prominent in the work of Shepard, Lakoff and Johnson, of course, with spatial metaphors. I've done some writing on it at the beginning of my PhD, and also Lachlan Kent did some really nice work that's also up on the Active Inference archive and in his papers, of course. So the idea of power being pulled towards complex social attractors was also famously presented by Pierre Bourdieu, who linked various concepts of capital, cultural capital, political capital, social capital, to power as this kind of social attraction and also traction. And he borrowed the metaphor from physical field theory, in fact. So there is already, the connection is really present and obvious there, only in a metaphoric way, which we're kind of trying to expand on here. So expanding also on his legacy to take the epistemological and the empirical as totally inseparable things that we're analyzing, and his desire to actually ground sociological analysis in a scientifically tractable manner. We're trying to frame these kind of attentional attractors that move systems towards certain configurations through active inference. And this framing allows for a new take on the dialectics between the individual and the collective, again, linking back to what was just mentioned at the end of the previous talk. So in terms of questions of information processing capacity, not only are resource distribution and the division of labor a systemic fact, but also the modulation and projection of future possibilities cannot be computed at the level of the individual, clearly. So this is something rather obvious in our context and how we're framing power. This is how and why the minimization of uncertainty for social systems is in fact social, right? So agents seek alliances and policies which ensure that cognition, so information processing and future projection can be distributed. And this allows for efficient practical traction because, and here I quote from Steinberg et al., 2023, epistemic confidence in knowing, interpreting, and acting together is that traction that happens when we're socially distributed. And this is in contrast with this kind of individualized agency where one's estimation of, and here I quote again, divergence in mental states between self and others is what allows for the sort of prediction and interpretation of others' behavior, which we might kind of want to frame as something that has a shorter range traction on the future. So now we're going to look at the theoretical framework, and I pass it over to Mahault.
So obviously, you have heard this 15 times, but I'm still going to go through it because there are some concepts in here that will become relatively salient after. But to go over it briefly, active inference explains how biological agents really minimize variational free energy to align their internal beliefs with external reality. So effectively, they've reduced discrepancies between expected and actual sensory inputs, and we sort of leverage this descent on free energy to couch model perception, cognition, and action through Bayesian belief updating. And so free energy is the upper bound on surprise or the unexpectedness of sensory data relative to an agent's predictions. And so direct computation of surprise is complex. So agents use variational free energy to approximate based on their internal and generative model. And so you can see that, for example, the KL divergence term measures how closely the internal beliefs match the true posterior. And so agents align their beliefs with actual data as they minimize it. And so the log likelihood term ensures predictions align with observations. So to minimize free energy, agents update their beliefs. They allow for adaptive action selection that supports coherent goal-directed behavior. And so there are two strategies: perceptual inference to adjust your beliefs to match the sensory inputs, and active inference, which is acting to change the environment and align new sensory data with internal models. Active inference, interestingly, and as we saw earlier with the whole word cloud, spans or can span multiple scales, from cellular processes maintaining homeostasis to cognitive systems using predictive coding to update beliefs based on hierarchical prediction errors. And so this really gives us a broad biological principle where minimizing free energy promotes systemic efficiency and optimal homeostasis across scales. And so reducing free energy really means that you minimize entropy as well, and you align your beliefs with reality to reduce this uncertainty. Important to note is that we also factor action. And so expected free energy can be decomposed into extrinsic, goal-oriented, and epistemic, uncertainty-reducing components that balance exploration and exploitations. And so this dual strategy ensures that agents achieve immediate goals while gathering information to adapt effectively in uncertain environments. And so central to active inference, we really have this concept of a generative model, which allows agents to predict sensory inputs and their hidden causes. The generative process represents the real-world states that produce observations, and generative models reflect the agent's hypotheses about these processes. The agent's actions correct mismatches between its model and real sensory inputs to align the model with reality. Going quickly over the different terms in a hierarchical structure, each level predicts the states of the ones below, and it corrects predictions based on sensory feedback. And there are conditional dependencies that cascade between layers that support belief updating and adaptation. We have observable states that are the sensory inputs the agent receives and tries to predict using its model, the hidden states, latent variables that represent underlying causes inferred by the agent to explain sensory inputs. There's a series of parameters that define the statistical dependencies between hidden and observable states, the likelihood function, which indicates how well the hidden states and parameters predict observed data. We have a prior distribution, which is the initial beliefs about the hidden states, and the posterior distribution, which is the updated beliefs after observing data and combining likelihood and prior. And then obviously we use the marginal likelihood, which is the probability of observed data under the model, to integrate over hidden states. And so we use this for model evaluation and comparison to determine how well a model explains sensory inputs. So the generative model really enables the agents to align its beliefs with the sensory data, sometimes through hierarchical predictions, realistically most often through hierarchical predictions and feedback loops, and they refine their understanding of the environment to improve action selection for adaptive behavior. And so this picture is really very individual. So we can see, though, that within this picture, it's really rife to couch power dynamics. So we start from individual agents as predictive systems that minimize uncertainty through prediction, through perception and action. And so Bruinberg really made a salient point about this with his paper on the primacy of I can, where agents develop, empowerment through embodied interactions, which enable them to affect the environment. And so if we scale this up to social power, agents use generative models for self-prediction, but also to predict others' intentions. They form the basis of social understanding and collective action. Carl has lots of work about this. Connor Hines as well, Axel Constant, Maxwell Ramstead, Casper Hess, Natalie Castell, which I believe will give a talk as well. And so attention is driven by deep preferences, and it shapes what becomes salient, which influences both individual and group behavior. At the group level, shared predictive models facilitate coordinated actions. So stigmergic processes, as explored by our very own Daniel, environmental modifications that guide behavior, allow distributed control, while deontic cues, as explored by Axel Constant, enforce social norms. And so cultural practices further shape collective attention. It creates shared perceptual landscapes, which is something that we explored with Toby Sinclair Smith. I think I said his name wrong. I called him Toby, so I don't really know how to say his name. And finally, we have to know how to couch joint attention. And this is work that Rémi Tison and Pierre Poirier at the Université of Québec in Montreal have also posited that this mechanism basically enables efficient coordination through mutual recognition of action possibilities. And so power structures emerge through self-organizing subgroups based on belief similarity. So again, this is work that has been explored by Natalie Castell, which we can call decentralized. Influence spreads within network structures, and they amplify certain narratives while marginalizing others. And so These processes create cultural capital where shared norms and knowledge facilitate efficient social interaction. The tension here is thus shaped by those preferences, but it shows that the importance of critically constructing shared narratives without homogenizing scripts that stifle diversities is an important thing to consider. So it's a point made by Hannah Arendt. Simplistic, one-dimensional views, like there is no alternative, constrain attention and reduce complex systems to narrow goals, which is why fascism tends to be very attractive, especially in times of high uncertainty. And so distributed generative models over time, including historical narratives and generational dynamics, give us the tools to envision power as possibilistic, which is a term that Sonia introduced here. This shifts the focus from isolated agency to collective dynamics and hierarchical organization. We get a richer analysis of how agents and groups interact within constraints to shape future possibilities. So active inference really gives us a frame for social power beyond very simplistic, atomized ideas of agency and focus instead on this emergent, distributed process that structure collective behavior and potential.
Thank you. So, yeah, to return to the concept of narrative, because it's sort of the thing that frames something that might go from the small scale to the large scale in different ways, and something that we can all colloquially sort of latch onto. Narratives are social mechanisms which have the power to make or break power, you can say. The cognitive exploration of the not yet engaged, right, of scripts that are not yet there, but one may kind of latch onto or sort of effectuate. Anything you can think of here, things like speculations, fictions, future possibilities of all sorts, can be understood as semantic attractors that enable kind of relatively risk-free learning, right? So you're projecting to imagine what might be the case if, and the simpler the narrative, usually the easier it is to sort of minimize like vast uncertainty. So these possibilistic explorations in the form of narratives allow agents to explore counterfactual scenarios and minimize uncertainty without this sort of exposure to the real world consequences of this. This safety mechanism frames both the evolutionary advantage and persistent appeal of narrative engagement in human culture. And in the context of power, leveraging strong narratives, as Mahault just pointed out, such as us versus them, that's like the one that, that's the biggest semantic attractor that we seem to keep returning to all the time, these types of reductionisms that greatly minimizes uncertainty about an agent's or group's current predicaments, and they become, because of this, very, very appealing and sometimes self-fulfilling, unfortunately, policies that bring about their effects, resulting in collective behaviors which can benefit, which can be beneficial or detrimental to the greater whole. The effects of variational free energy minimization can be observed, of course, at the level of the basic structures of language in this sense. So semantic attractors like redundancy, rhyme, alliteration, etc., can be understood as patterns which aid memory, communication, informational retrieval policies, because they permanently reappear, right? So pulling attention to the same phenomena, and here I use scare quotes very, very strongly, the same phenomenon, thus greatly reducing the need to interpret and organize linguistic interaction and cognition anew every time, which is very costly. So we can understand, for example, the possible emergence of rhythmic patterning in communication as enabling the storage and access of information collectively. By connecting a sound pattern to a phenomenon, we reduce uncertainty about reality once that sound pattern is witnessed. Again, in sort of true Pavlovian fashion. By way of the same uncertainty minimizing mechanisms, simple or complex narrative constructs create cognitive situations where agents reduce complex aspects of the world down to preferred scenarios. And now we can look at how active inference is a useful applied framework for this. I pass it over to Mao again.
Thank you. So I'm here drawing on work that is currently ongoing from other people as well with whom I'm collaborating, and I want to make sure that these ideas are appropriately attributed to them. We're going to talk about individual agency and empowerment, and so autonomy can be defined as a system's capacity to self-govern using internal norms. So again, this is a topic explored by Jacqueline Hines, Alex Kiefer, Inés Pulido, in part at Versus. And so empowerment here is measured by the maximum mutual information between an agent's actions and resulting states. And so this reflects how much influence an agent has over future states. Higher empowerment means greater potential for desired outcomes. And so empowerment maximizes the entropy of actions and states while ensuring strong action-state correlations. Autonomous agents are thus more driven by intrinsic motivation. And this is a premise that, again, Alex Kiefer is one of the pioneers here. It's thus connected to drives and control to systems that optimize future action state paths. And so under active inference, agents minimize expected free energy to balance exploration, information seeking, and exploitation, goal pursuit. And so this involves perceptual inference to update beliefs and generate model refinements through action outcomes. And so here, power operates as an attractor in social systems. It draws agents towards influential entities through access to resources and strategic advantages, capital. It leads therefore to amplification through feedback loops. Powerful agents help others minimize their expected free energy by providing some degree of stable, predictable frameworks and reshaping the informational landscape. And so high power entities have privileged access to information and can model their environment more effectively. And they also influence what can be modeled and how, impacting the collective predictive landscape. Powerful agents can offload cognitive demands as well, processing complex information more efficiently and directing narratives to manage error absorption and uncertainty. So power here enables agents to shape others' focus, directing attention to favorable states while diminishing access to alternatives. And this leads to feedback loop where control over the environment enhances influence and perpetuates power. The whole story around the 1%. So power grants a broader range of operational capabilities and extends influence over others' state space policies within its domain. And so here, active inference reveals power as this emergent property of the connection between perception, action, and social structures, where powerful agents maintain and expand their control by shaping both informational and physical environments. So let's go over three main components: precision modulation, belief alignment, and ultimately minimizing divergence. First, precision modulation. Powerful agents shape expected outcomes by altering the social or informational environment, as we saw. They create narratives or scripts that effectively reduce the dimensionality of the state space, forming stable attractors such as social norms or shared stories. And these attractors direct collective attention and ensure that other agents align their actions with these preferred states. But here, basically, the posterior belief about states has an alpha that modulates the impact of precision on these beliefs. And so in belief alignments, the power to direct attention and utilize precision modulation really enables the leaders to make specific aspects of reality more salient for others. And so by establishing these attractors within the belief space, the leaders guide others' interpretations and behaviors, These attractors act as a focal point, reducing ambiguity and encouraging agents to align their beliefs and actions around them, thus fostering a shared understanding. And so the alignment process naturally emerges from minimizing the expected free energy. And so, for example, where P of O given S and pi is the likelihood of outcomes given states under policy pi, and Q of S given O and pi is the posterior beliefs about states. And so this decomposition shows us the intrinsic and extrinsic components which balance uncertainty reduction with goal-oriented behavior that is shaped by this precision that we mentioned earlier. And so finally, minimizing divergence can be represented just using a Kullback-Leibler divergence, which is a measure of the difference between two agents' belief distributions. And so a lower KL divergence indicates closer belief alignments. And so leaders influence this alignment by modulating this precision, which amplifies confidence in specific interpretations. And so the process minimizes belief divergence across agents, which promotes synchronized understanding and cohesive group behavior without the necessity for direct coercion, although that is yet another way to minimize the state space and therefore is an available practice. So precision modulation sets the framework for control, belief alignments, ensures collective cohesion, and minimizing divergence formalizes this alignment. So basically we capture the dynamics and influence, the dynamics of power and influence within social systems.
And so finally, we come to the conclusion. We have a lot more in the paper that we're still working out, so look out for that. So what we're thinking about here in terms of this kind of shift, attentional shift from ideas of territorial and material power to this new realm of informational and computational power. This for us requires attention to attention, for sure. Something that we can look at in ways that we can formalize. And of course, we propose that active inference provides crucial theoretical tools for making power structures visible and therefore analyzable, and so allowing possibly for the potential to rethink current social asymmetries. So again, given this sort of apparent transition between the organization of life around the centrality of physical work and matter and things moving in space towards the centrality of attention and information, especially considering the whole attention economy idea, we kind of try to think about a possible sustainable social future, which requires the addressing of both resource and information distributions. And the latter is best analyzed through the power of attention, as we've tried to show, as a major factor or one major vector influencing social dynamics. And of course, this is very important to mention, hierarchies are inevitable in complex thermodynamic systems, but we propose, if we can begin thinking about this, fostering transparent plastic hierarchies that remain contestable and thus open to novelty, open to learning, right? This approach has to acknowledge historic and thermodynamic constraints while also acknowledging space for systemic evolution. And while hierarchies are inevitable, social scripts should be read-writable by those with an interest in survival within them, right? And this helps reorient our understanding of an unfolding, globalizing, interconnected, and interdependent life. And participation in a system is only participatory if those involved are able to track the consequences of the variables and thus future state spaces at stake. A true distribution of information processing capabilities is essential for systemic sustainability and proper equitable development. And when thinking through evolutionary biology lenses, for example, let's try to polish them clearly and not fall into social Darwinism narratives. And to quote from the Xenofeminist Manifesto, lovely colleagues there, Patricia Reed, for example, if nature is unjust, then we change nature, which is what we are all in the business of doing here a little bit. All right, that was our presentation.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, we'll be back in a few minutes.